looking forward to this. This is the second session of the Walter Califf Jazz Series, and we have with us again Scott Wilson. Very happy about that. Last week, Scott took us down memory lane through the 60s. He wove the social and political milestones into the jazz timeline, and I think we all appreciated that. And I say Don and myself and Julianne, have had many, many comments this week from people. And I think I saw a few people bopping down hallways and humming certain songs this week. Wasn't it nice also to see a young, fresh Elvis? That's the picture I have of him now, instead of the old grotesque fellow full of drugs and whatever. This week, Scott is going to take us on a national and international journey into the world of music and what it takes to make music based on his own life experiences. We'll have time for questions and answers at the end. And if you want to make a comment during the presentation, you can always use the chat box and we'll look at that later. So right now, I would like you to join me in welcoming a multi-talented, very busy, totally dynamic force in today's music world, Scott Wilson.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Hope everyone is doing great this morning. And I'm really, really happy to be here and talk about the global entertainment industry and what kind of happens behind the scenes and answer any of those questions that you have, anything from Universal Studios to Walt Disney World, and basically kind of give you a bird's eye view of what happens when you see a show. Like you see a casual show at Walt Disney, you go there and you have all the people and the costumes and the music and the arrangements and the props, and how does this all come together? What is kind of like the timeline to putting some of that stuff together? And it's actually quite exciting. My best memories of music in general come from the entertainment industry, of doing performances and shows and having the resources and tools, the amount of money that you need to really do it right, and the right talent. And where do you get the talent? Where does the talent come from? How do you audition the talent? Where does it all start? Just to come up with one show. And it's kind of a thing where once you're in it, you're learning many different parts of the puzzle, and you kind of just keep going up the chain until you kind of have a good overview of a show. And then we're going to take our creative time and creative efforts to build a creative show with the class. We're going to storyboard it, talk about how to do it, and come up with a really cool concept, and have some actors and people that are going to do some stuff, and see if we can kind of be our own creative team and what that's going to look like. But first, let me talk a little bit about my work in the industry and what I did, to give you kind of an overview. When I left the University of North Texas, one of my first jobs out of there was in China. I got hired to write the music for a theme park that was opening, called Grand Link World, and had to live there. I got out there several months early. I arrive in China, no one's there yet. The park is still being built, and I'm up in a hotel, and they're just giving me storyboard pictures of, okay, here's this float, and here's this ride, and we want you to write the music to this. And I'm scoring as fast as I can to write all this music. And of course, it's under a lot of pressure, because there's a timeline. The band's coming in 2 months, and I have just an enormous amount of music to write and to get parts out for, and to get recorded and all that stuff. And so I'm going to show you some pictures of those, what kind of like the things that I would get. What does a composer get when they're writing the music for their story? You know, what resources do they have to make sure the music is right? We'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about what it's like to manage all the people, which I had to do for Grand Link World in China. Before, I was musical director for Universal Studios after that, and what it was like doing that. But first, let's just talk about some shows. And what is a show? So when I was musical director at Universal Studios, I had to oversee the shows, write for shows, come up with creative teams, what equipment would be needed, all those types of things. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll talk a little bit about that. Alrighty. So this is just kind of an overview of like some atmosphere groups. I just pulled some photos of some things. So you know, it's just not all music. There's all kinds of things going on in an atmosphere like at a Universal Studios that have to do with shows. Comedians, actors, stuntmen, singers, dancers, and you have a whole pool. I had about 180 people to pull from to do different types of shows. And so we'll pull up one of these. So this was the Golden Oldies show. Golden Oldies show was like, like the movie Grease, you know, where we had it in front of Mel's Diner. We had the, you know, the truck there. We had all of the dancers and singers and incredible arrangements written out by great people in LA, actually. And this show was so exciting. Of course, there was roller skaters. It was like you were watching the movie Grease. And this kind of show, when you're thinking about casting, you have to get people that look the part, that act the part, sing the part, that dance the part. And a lot of people, believe it or not, in the US are short on some skills with this stuff. We usually have to get some talent from around the world, like from Sydney, Australia, where they go schools where you go, and instead of like learning just theater or just dance, you have to learn everything. You have to learn to be a singer. You have to learn to be a musician. You have to learn to be a dancer. You have to learn to be a choreographer. And all those people come out of there with like multifaceted skills. England has some places like that too, London. And also, of course, people in the United States, you know, we have tons of American talent that are there, but no real schools that really specialize like that. So we're finding these people, trying to come up with some ideas. And then how would you even begin to start the show? Like, what would be your first step? Think about hey, Julie, is your microphone on?
Yes, I'm sorry to interrupt. We had a comment. Can you show this as full screen?
You mean bigger here?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, one of our participants asked if it could just be bigger.
Okay, let's see.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Here.
Down at the bottom, enter full screen. Oh.
Where is it at? Under here?
Yeah, down, scroll all the way down, yeah.
Ah, there we go. How's that?
Thank you.
So where would you even start just for this one show? So like first, once you got the people, who does the costuming? Like you got to work with the costuming. You have to be able to tell people exactly what you want, show them images. What music are you going to select? And then who is going to choreograph it? What type of dancing is it going to be? All these types of things, just to get the music right, just to give you an idea for something for like this show, for this stuff that's like a Grease Lightning show. One of the things that we would do at Universal Studios is we'd go to the CD store and we'd buy up every single CD that had this type of music in it, every single CD arrangement, everything, and creatively listen to them. Same thing if you're doing a Christmas show and you're gonna have a big, huge Christmas show, you want the right music that say the Japanese or the Chinese are gonna relate to, that's American style, but also is something that they would know or something they could sing along with. And you're sitting there listening for hours and hours and hours and hours just to get an idea and storyboard what type of music that you would have. And then once you select that and people kind of get an idea, well, then you're actually into the creative part where, okay, who are we going to cast? You know, where are these people? Oh, we have this great, you know, person that looks just like John Travolta. In this show, we're going to pull him from that show and put him in this show. We have a great, you know, arranger that writes this exact style of music in LA. We're going to give him a call and we're going to have him produce the tracks for us. And then those tracks launch. And then, of course, you have to think about the team needed. All these people have microphones, they have assistants, they have people that have to get them into the break room, out of the break room. They have managers that are making sure, and tech operation people, how many of those people are all needed? So just in doing one show, there's a million variables that go on. And then of course, what equipment needs do you need in the park at that particular location? Who specializes in that? Who are the audio guys that can install it or add to it or amplify it or replace old stuff that needs to be, better modified, or calibrate the speakers so they're all coming at the same time. These are the kind of things that you're thinking about. So this particular show was super fun. Everybody liked it, and it had a storyboard on it. When you start a show, we start with a creative circle, all right? And that circle, we just do little branch outs, and we have, what do we want the audience to experience in this show? What would be some of the things that would capture, what are the details that we want them to think? And so we're going to take a little creative exercise right now for those who have their pencil and paper. Everybody have pencil and paper ready? All right. Well, you're going to draw. Oh, sorry. Let's start with this show. Let's say we're going to do this one right here. This was the Sesame Street show. This one we wanted to have for kids. So parents bringing their kids, and they wanted to experience a certain thing with their kids. They wanted to have this experience, bigger than life experience. So we start with this creative circle, and I'm going to ask you guys to draw what things and emotions would be in that creative circle. Usually we'd have 12 dials. And so do you want for example, you want the children and families to hold hands and sing along. You want a feeling of bewilderment. You want a feeling of comfort and joy. You want husbands and wives to look each other in the eyes and give each other a kiss. These are the types of things before you write the script. Before you start with how is this show scripted, we got to know what we're making the audience feel. And so your circle right now is for that Sesame Street. Write down what emotions you think the audience members should feel if it's a really great show for children. So I'm going to give you about 2 minutes. Draw your little circle, your little dials out, and just put words or sentences or little cues about how it is that you think this, what you think these people should feel during this show. All right, I'm going to give you just about 30, 40 seconds. And go. And be creative. Remember, it's a creative team. You can think outside the box. Don't forget, you got the characters. All righty. So while you're still writing, I'm just going to talk to you. This show, we decide, is going to run 7 days a week. So we can't have performers 7 days a week. So we're going to have backup performers that alternate on certain days. So we got to coordinate all of that. And we only are going to want one stage assistant for this children's show. And how do we do that? And we're going to cast 4 Japanese cast members, so they can talk to the Japanese people in Japanese. This wonderful, wonderful Sesame Street birthday celebration show. All right, we have the gallery. I'm going to call on some people. Jack, what are your emotional responses to this show that we're going to build?
Well, you have a couple of Jacks, but I was thinking of Glee.
Glee is great. All right. What else? Anything else, Jack?
Nothing that excited me.
All right, so we got to figure out how to make people feel glee. How about Bud? Bud, what is some things you got there?
I want the show so good that the audience would want to return to see it again.
All right, so we want elements for them to come back and enjoy the show. And that's a tricky one to do, but it is absolutely doable and know how to do that. All right, how about you, Keith?
Yes, I would like excitement, participation, being part of the show, activity, audience participation, say maybe up in one of the trash cans or something on the stage perhaps, actors being able to come down into the audience at times, celebration.
Keith, you're hired. We're hiring you tomorrow. Exactly. That is exactly it. All right. How about Jordan? Oh, I don't think we can hear you, Jordan.
Participation would be something like hand clapping, stomping of feet, singing together, laughter, smiles.
All right. That's good. How about Al? No, Al? You can hear. Susan, you want to give us some stuff? Oh, your mic's not on. It's hard to keep track of. Still not on.
Am I on?
I hear someone said, "Am I on?"
Yes, she's on. Susan.
Here we go.
Here we
How
go.
about a sense of wonder? I want them to be excited enough to buy T-shirts at the performance. Happy faces, colorful, just colorful audience, and some that feel warm and fuzzy. That's Sesame Street.
Awesome. Hang on one second. I got to grab a pen.
While Scott's away, we kind of talked at the beginning about if you want to be called on, turn on your video. And if your video is not on, he won't call on you to put you on the spot. So maybe that'll help.
So we've got this sense of wonder. Now, how do you create wonder? We're going to just talk about that, and we'll get maybe one more input here. How about, let's see, David?
I think the key for a show in Japan would be to bring out the nostalgia, and if there's not a sense of the nostalgic recognition of the characters, then you find a way to carve through whatever it is in Japan, particularly that can make the audience relate.
Right on. All right, so now we've got a little storyboard. Now it gets complicated. How do we bring these ideas into a show and make it happen? We start storyboarding just the words, wonder, the feeling of wonderment. Well, how would we do that? Is it possible that at one point in the show something happens, and let's say we release some pigeons that fly out of the top of the house that's right above them, or that fly out of a present that's offered, or something unexpected where they're like, wow. There's ideas like that we've used to create kind of a wonderment type of thing. There's also music that plays into wonderment. What type of music creates this wonderment type of feeling in Disney Cascade, this kind of stuff. Anybody have ideas for wonderment that you want to share?
I have one. How about the lighting?
Lighting is a huge part of the show, is creating that. For example, if you spotlight a character and everything goes out, and you spotlight just that character and drop the music, you capture the audience. And then all of a sudden the cast member looks up at the audience and says something powerful, something meaningful. I remember when, such and such. I remember when there was a time, such and such and such and such, and you can create music and background to that. That's really great. Hand claps, that's an easy one. what we want all these people to do, we want all these kids to feel like they're part of the show. So we're going to have things scripted into the music, scripted into the show, where we have the audience hold hands, and they're going to sing something that they might know that will teach them really quickly on the spot. Let's teach Ernie a song. Does you want to teach Ernie a song? How many people in the audience want to teach Ernie a song? And then everybody's like, oh, I want to teach Ernie a song. And then you're like, all right, let's teach him a song. How about this? 1, 2, 3, you know, and then you go off the stuff where it's for kids. So you have different things based on the age level. Hand claps is really, really important during the show. And then how about you want these kids, you want these parents to love their kids and feel so close that they have their kids. And so how do we do that? How do we make these people in a show feel like they just want to give their kid a hug and they want to just hold hands? How do we do that? Any ideas? It's a creative team, so there's no wrong ideas. You can say anything, and sometimes that leads to beautiful, beautiful things. How about you?
Maybe you could do something in the show where hugs are become an important feature, or something that someone who needs a hug or is so excited they have to hug somebody, and then you somehow get the audience participating in the same way to imitate that kind of hug or something.
Now we're getting somewhere. Keith, I'm telling you, you're hired. Right there. So need a hug. Now we tie these things together. How about we teach Ernie a song where he needs a hug and is telling people he needs a hug. And then finally he gets a hug from, say, Bert, and he gets a hug, and then everybody goes, let's all hug each other. But that's exactly it. You see how we would tie these things together? We would say, all right, we need people to hug. How do we do it? Well, let's have a song about it. Let's have a creative song. I need a hug. You need a hug. We all need hugs all day. Like things like that. And then have a little hand clap motion where we teach the kids that, and the characters are teaching the kids that. And then all of a sudden everybody is hugging and having a great time. So that is a really, really good thing. Now, let's work at one more angle, and we'll move on from this little creative exercise just so you can get an idea. What about nostalgia? How do you create nostalgia? Any ideas out there? One second.
How about if you have one of the characters in the show begin with something like, Ernie, do you remember back when we were a long time ago when we were just little tiny, mice or ants or whatever they are, and they start thinking back and then somehow involve the audience? That's the question. How do you get the audience involved in that?
That's it. That's exactly right. So now we would need one of you to become one of the script writers for that segment. How about you write me a segment on the script? How do we create that nostalgia? They're thinking about what if we had an Ernie, and as he's thinking about when he was little, all of a sudden we cast this little Japanese kid that comes out in a little Ernie outfit, and the spotlight goes on him, and he's looking at himself when he's young, and he can't fit the cookie in his mouth, because the cookie monster is, we have the cookie monster. He can't fit the cookie in his mouth. He's too little. He's trying so hard. We got a gigantic, that means we got to get the cast member to build a gigantic cookie. We need one bigger than his head as he's trying to, and that kind of stuff is funny. But now who makes the cookie? Got to decide who am I going to have make this gigantic fake cookie that we use 7 shows, 7 days a week. There's so many variables to go, and what are the costumes going to be like and the casting? And so how are we going to have like these children's like costumes that are super, super fun? And then of course we would cast members of the Japanese cast, if we had 4 members, with high-pitched voices. We want high-pitched voices so they sound like kids. So they sound like the kids aren't, there's not much separation between them. And that's kind of how you would start to create a show. Now, the problem is there's multiple shows going on in multiple venues. So this kind of creative process gets storyboarded months and months and months out. If we were working on a Christmas show in December, we would be hitting the pavement in January. Like, because all the costumes have to be made, all the music has to be written, all the arrangements have to be done, all of the performers have to be hired, they have to be brought in, we have to choreograph, we have to have 2 weeks of choreographed shows in-house before we release them to the public to make sure it's awesome. You know, we have to have time for the costumes not to fit. So if we have the costuming and people get fitted and something's wrong, this all has to get ahead of schedule. And then we have to coordinate everybody's schedules. So we have, I'm going to show you a team that does that and how it is, but I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. And let's see, where did that go? I was looking up nostalgia. There it is. Oh, no, that's PowerPoint. 1 second. Where did my PDF go? It disappeared. 1 second. Technical difficulties. There it is. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so then we had, of course, in the park, we had the breakdancing show. We have a show right when they're coming in, right when these people are coming in, we have, they're coming in the park and coming in the door. We have a breakdancing show with everybody dancing. I don't know if you can see, but all these people that are standing around, we need choreographers for that. We gotta, how do I find breakdancers in Japan? So let's say I'm musical director. What do I gotta do to find breakdancers? Any ideas?
Or the local gym.
The local gym? Well, believe it or not, the reason why when I was at Universal Japan, I had 3 apartments. I had an apartment in my mainstay that was in Bentencho, that was huge. I had an apartment that was in the casting building. We had a whole building that housed all the casting. That was an entire apartment complex. I have a place there in case I need to work. And then I have a place on the other side of the city because taxis on the way home are so expensive that it's cheaper to actually have an apartment where I can just crash if I need to. But to find breakdancers, I'm gonna have to go out to all of the clubs. I'm gonna have to go in Japan to clubs, find talent, see somebody breakdancing that I think is awesome, and offer them a job at Universal Studios. Now, that's kind of what my job was. I'd have to go find comedians, I'd have to go do things. With the breakdancers, I didn't have to cast any of those. They were actually already cast when I got there. But that is an example of how it is a musical director finds a talent. I also might want to have a casting call and say casting for breakdancers on such and such day, and then, you know, have people submit their materials. But yeah, so that's the kind of stuff like when you're a talent scout and you're searching for talent, your eyes are always open. You're always where the talent is. Where do I find these people? I'm going to go to their location. How do I find great singers in Japan? I'm going to see all of the great bands and all of the great nightlife. I'm going to be on the nightlife every single night, so I know all of the exciting talent that's out there. And that's why it's a pretty exciting life to get into. Now, we also have this type of entertainment. So look at these 2 people. You can see them. They're at the Jurassic Park ride, and they're just little like, you know, scavenger hunters. And it's a comedy duo. So these people are like they're pretending like they're actually there, like it's Jumanji, and they're like, you know, people are wondering what they're doing. And that kind of adds to the atmosphere, entertainment of like, wow, I'm somewhere different. You know, I see these little actors walking around and doing stuff. We'd have scripts for them. We'd have a whole dialed thing of what if an audience member asked this? What if an audience member asked that? We want it to be scripted really well. So we would cast these people that are fun and zany, usually people that had great physical comedy art, you know, with their bodies. They can do all kinds of funny stuff and all that stuff. So we got a show like that. Oh, this one was great. Synergy. Synergy was like a top pop kind of group singing all kinds of stuff that made people want to dance and sing along. And that was a great group. Hired a bunch of people out of LA for that one. Who had produced this guy right here ended up becoming one of our producers in-house and writing tracks for his own group after singing with them for a while. It's great. Then we have fun stuff like this, Thunder Drums. You know, so where do we get these drums built? Like all this stuff is stuff entertainment in the global entertainment industry. Like who makes them? Who makes them really, really well? Who makes them to last 5 days a week? Where do we get these costumes and these fun headdresses and stuff? Who makes those in Japan and how much are they? Can we afford them? Do we have to downsize? A million decisions just in a show like this. Here's another one that we decided. Japan is really hot during the summer for Universal Studios. So these guys walk around with water sprayers and have a whole comedy routine to cool people off. That was a great creative idea that I was like, man, that's a fantastically creative idea, because if you're hot and you're walking around, you just don't want to stand underneath one of those water things. You want it to come to you. So they go out in the park and they search for people that look hot and exhausted, do a whole comedy routine around them, spraying the water and stuff like that. At the end, they're just having a great time instead of miserable and hot. Now, isn't that a great idea?
Perfect.
Absolutely. Let's bring the water sprayers directly to them. So again, creative ideas, solving problems. This is another comedy duo that was really, really fun. They would just walk around the park and do comedy sketches. And this was like a firehouse show. These people would simulate like putting out fires and stuff like that, as if something was happening in Universal. Oh my gosh, something's happening. Oh, there's a house on fire. And the whole comedy thing about how everything falls apart, you know, and nothing's going right. Super, super funny. And you're not going to be able to see this, but if you can turn your head, I wish I could rotate this, but I'm not sure how to do that. But this is kind of, oh gosh, how do I rotate that?
Right up there, right up here.
Rotate left. There we go. And let me rotate this other one, and then I'll put it in full screen. All righty, go back to this one and enter full screen. One second. I'm getting this other extra one. Oh, that again. Kick me out, bummers. Okay, so you see a creative group. In the creative group, you'd have all these different team members. You'd have a production group that handled all the types of production that was going to be. Each one of these people would have different jobs and what it is they do. You'd have an administrative group who's going to administer all of that. And then, of course, you're hiring the best talented people that do this stuff really well in each one of those categories. And this is like kind of an entertainment department organizational plan. Then you'd have show operations. You have people that handle who's going to handle the equipment, who's going to test the equipment, who's going to make sure it's working before they go out on the show, who's going to put it up after the show, who's going to box it up. You'd have all these types of people that are doing those types of things. All right, I'm going to exit this now.
It wasn't sharing.
Oh, it wasn't sharing?
Scott.
Oh, hold on. Let me try that again. Oh, okay.
There you go.
Hold on. So let me enter full screen again. So like this, you see the creative group, and you can't see that, but if I can tell you what those are. So under the creative group, the types of people that you have in there, as you can see, you're going to have a creative advisor, a creative manager, a creative assistant. You're going to have a choreographer. You're going to have a stunt trainer, an audio producer, a media director, musical director, a coordinator, and assistants to those people. That's all in this first part. Underneath that, in the production group, like right here, who's in the production group? Well, you're going to have a general manager. You're going to have 2 production managers, a special event manager. You're going to have producers for each types of things. You're going to have a coordinator, a project coordinator, and you're going to have a media specialist. Under administrative group down here, you're going to have people like financing and staffing, right? We need to figure out how much money we have. We have to sit down and go, here's our budget for all of these shows. How much money can we throw at this? And that shows how big we can make it or how small we have to make it. You're going to have staff. You're going to have people that have to train other people. You're going to need an office crew. You're going to need a physical therapist. And you're also going to need some safety crews that can talk about all of the different safety issues that might happen. Then over here in show operations, now this is where you get into all the stuff. You're going to have a chief manager. You're going to have stage managers, all different types of different stage managers. You're going to have show technicians, technical directors. You're going to have different various tech people, some that work with audio, some that work with visual. And you're going to have show schedule coordinators and stuff like that. So there's a lot of people involved in this big machine, and getting them all to think the same and do the same is quite the stuff. Now, one thing I did learn about the entertainment industry is it's very competitive. It's competitive in the sense that everybody wants creative control. Everybody wants that. Everybody wants to do the casting and cast their people. Everybody wants the production. As a producer, I would be a line producer in Universal. A line producer, how many people know what a line producer is? All right, so let me explain what a line producer is. So we had producers that come into Universal that would come in from all over the globe that produce shows for us. A line producer is a person that manages those producers. It manages how much money they need for a specific show. I call up somebody and I say, hey, we have this great show. Can you write the music for it? How much do you think that's going to cost? Can you do the choreography for this? How much time do you think that would take? And then all of a sudden I find out I'm halfway into the middle of the show and the producer comes and says, hey, we need these props. We've got to have these props to make this show work. We have to have this to make this show work. And as a line producer, I then have to go into the budget and go, where does this money come from now? Because we allocated this specific money to this show, and now I need to find money because all of a sudden, let's say if you're doing Waterworld, where you have people coming down, the jet skis are flying off the ramps, they're going down into the water, up underneath the tunnel, and they're coming up, and they're literally going through fire, right? And you have fire things pumping and all this stuff. Well, we actually need some more money for that. We actually need these specific jet skis that don't clog underwater. We need these specific things. So entertainment industry is like really, really heavy. Luckily, I wasn't involved in any of those decisions with the Waterworld show. It's one of the greatest shows I've ever seen. If you ever are in Universal Japan, it's just spectacular. There's explosions. It's just like the movie. We literally hired the stuntmen on the Waterworld movie that did that stuff to actually be the stuntmen in the show, which was really cool. And then they had their creative room. It's so funny. Stuntmen always have to be in hot tubs and massaging their muscles and stuff. So they'd get off the show and then they'd all just be sitting there relaxing, enjoying life, having fun. So that's kind of like an overview of the shows. Do you have any questions on that? And I hope that kind of gave you kind of a little bit of insight into what it is, how it is that a creative show is put together. But I'd like to field some questions from the audience about things that you might want to know. No questions?
I have a question.
Sure.
Oh, how do you deal with different cultures? Who laughs at what? And are you going to tell a joke that nobody's going to understand? Is there somebody who handles those sorts of things?
Yes, I specifically put it in the hands of the comedians. And here's why. People don't know how sophisticated comedians are, but I've lived with them and I've also cast them. The guy who I cast who was in my show, I didn't cast him, but he was in my show. He just did a comedy sketch with Sting. This is how good it is. But when I first did it, I'll give you a great insight of why you leave this to the comedians. I wrote a Christmas show for Universal, and they came back to me and they said, hey, we're going to buy your show. We want you to play in it. It's a great show. We're going to add a comedian to your brass Christmas group. I'm like, a comedian? What are you talking about? Like, I'm a serious musician. I just came out of North Texas. You're going to add a comedian to my show? And they're like, yeah, we are. Young kid, 20 years old. His name's Dave Eastgate out of Australia. I'm like, all right, let me go meet Dave Eastgate. To this day, just one of the greatest guys I ever met. Just so funny. Literally a guy where you don't know people like this. Dave and I could be, he's just a normal guy, you know, we're hanging out. He could walk into a club anywhere in Japan and have everybody laughing. If you've never met anybody that can just walk up and just make anybody laugh, he'd pick up guitar, sing songs, he'd you know, make fun of himself. It was just awe. I was in awe by this kid because he was so talented at 20 years old and he knew what he was doing. Anyway, so we're in the middle of the show and Dave's doing his script. He decides he's going to learn Japanese. So in like 6 months, he's learned Japanese, like enough to like totally do his whole show in comedy in Japanese. Osaka Ben, nonetheless. It's a more like a street dialect, which is kind of a funny dialect. And he's introducing me in the show and he's like, and he's like introducing me, everybody's laughing. And he's introducing the next person, everybody's laughing. Every time he said something, everybody is laughing. And the script would change all the time. And I'm like, Dave, I'm like, let me take you to lunch. I'm like, how do you do that? Tell me how you do it. And he's like, well, Scott, for example, when I introduce you as Fuji Watamarika. And he's like, that's a famous model in Japan that everybody knows of. And obviously you're not a model, you know? And he's like, and then I look at the age of the audience. He's like, if the audience members is this age, he's checked out the TV series that these kids would be most likely to watch. And he knows what characters from those shows that everybody's going to know. He knows what the dialect is. If he sees a bunch of old folks and it's all old folks and stuff like that, he knows who the old Japanese actors are that they would totally relate to. And he goes, so I just scan the room. I look at what's going on. I reach into my Rolodex of what it is that makes them laugh. The comedians that they already know. And I make reference and I study those shows. I go back and I do research. And I'm like, how do you know that at 20 years old? Well, he comes from Sydney, Australia, where they teach people how to really be comedians. It's not luck. These people are skilled surgeons. And so that is a great, great, great question about how do you do that and how do you make people laugh? Also, you do find jokes that don't work. And so you throw them out. And then you find ones that strikingly work really well, or you'll even find one, an audience member will make a comment and say something and you'll be like, hey, we're going to put that in the show. How about the trumpet player make that comment to me, and just constantly adapting, like, Dave, what do you think we should do about this song? Or we called him in this show, it was a Christmas show. We called him Chris Jingle. And we dressed this comedian up with this gigantic hat, and he had jingles all over his white suit, like little strips of jingles. So when he would come walking out, it would like literally jingle all over the place and stuff. And then he would just get out there and woo him. Fantastic comedian. And that's a great thing. Great question. How about anybody else? Anybody else have any other questions before we go on?
Do you see the question in chat, Scott, or you want me to read it?
Go ahead and read it.
What is the total number of people involved? I'm assuming maybe in a show?
Well, no, I know what they're talking about. In a show, it all varies because you can have anywhere from 2 people to a show to as many as 500, like in Tokyo Disney. We'd have 500 people engaged in one show. So it really, it depends on how many, how big the show is, if it's a main show on the main stage, if it's just when people are in a certain part of a park. And then how many people are involved in the office? Well, in the Universal Studios office, where I was, it was an entire office floor, an office floor staff. And I'll be honest, I'm not one of the guys like Mike Davis who ran the entertainment, where he really knows the stuff inside and out. He runs all of that stuff. He was an amazing boss. For years and years and years, he worked at Universal Studios just flawlessly. But from what I saw when I was there, I definitely got a taste of how much was involved. And that whole office floor staff, when I would walk in, I would have my schedule dialed in. The Japanese have it dialed in literally to the minute. When I walked in, I had an Outlook thing. I pulled it up. They were like, at 7 o'clock here, at 7:10 you're here, at 7:30 you're here. You have a meeting with here, and there is no going over the line. Like, the Japanese are so detailed. It would dishonor them if I was like, oh, I took an extra 5 minutes for lunch. No. If it's something says 7:45 or something says 8 o'clock, that's when it's happening. And so I would have 3 translators. I'd have translators all over the place that were constantly translating for me while I learned Japanese. And that was really, really exciting because they literally just follow you everywhere, and you say something and they talk, and then they go on their break, and then the next one comes in and they talk. And so you have to have translators for all this. Same thing when I was co-musical director and the staff writer for Grand Link World in China. I didn't speak Chinese, so I had to have all these Chinese people. Now, that being said, the best part of being in these shows and doing this stuff is not actually the shows themselves. Of course, you meet everybody and all that stuff. It's living in the country, not visiting it, not going for 2 weeks, not going for a month, but actually living in the country of Japan, living in the country of China, and knowing what it's all about and kind of getting an idea of their culture. For example, when I was in China and I was the staff writer, every single restaurant I walked in Qingdao, every single one, everybody knew I was the new musical director over at Grand Link World in China, and that I was the person. They would be prepped if I was coming in to their restaurant. And they would put me in a private room with all of their food, they would come out with all the fruits and vegetables and lay them out on the trays and all of the different dishes that they made. They wanted to make sure I knew that their restaurant was open and that I would bring in my talent and staff to eat there. I had never been treated like that in the US. In the US, if you're a musician, they ask you to walk in the back door. You know, they're like, oh yeah, don't be seen by the audience. And yeah, whatever you do, don't talk. You know, it's like, but in these other countries, these type of people like musical directors are really taken seriously. In the same way, I never knew what it would be like to be the Beatles, but in China, when we opened those doors to the amusement park and 1 million people came rushing in, like literally screaming because they never had a theme park in that area. It's a low socioeconomic area. These people don't even know the word hello in China, and where I was at. Like literally, they just like you might not know how to say hello in Chinese, they didn't know how to say hello in English, and they would rush you and mob you. And we had to get police officers and security guards to keep people off them. That was actually a good feeling to know what it's like to actually be appreciated. And then also in Japan, one of the cool things they have is people would take shows. They're fanatical about entertainers. I had one person, this one lady that attended 300 of our shows, 300, and she made us all a disc, everybody in the show, of all the pictures she took at each show. It was unbelievable. Just like, and they have these booths where the Japanese can go and they can print your picture on their shoes, on their hats, on their shirts. So you'd be walking around the theme park and everybody has your picture on them. And it was just like really, really so surreal. You actually felt like a star. You know, you're like, wow, like people are really like, you know, and of course the entertainers, anytime we all went out to a club, it would just be mobbed by the Japanese. Like if all the American entertainers went out to some dance club, the word would get out and spread like wildfire. And before you know it, there would just be packed with people. My Japanese wife, Maiko, she always talks because what I did is I built a top 40 funk band to play in downtown Osaka at this club. And we had all the great horns from Disney that we had hired. I had a great rhythm section from Trinidad and great singers. And literally there was no place in the club for her to stand other than behind me while I played with her arm around me. So that's kind of fun stuff, fun life of an entertainer, fun living. And then of course, after the shows, we'd have a great time. We'd go back to the entertainment casting building. I mean, you can imagine this, everybody's living there. We're all just having a great time, really creative. We made all kinds of new shows and stuff, but that's kind of that. Any other questions?
Yeah, where are you going next?
I'm going here to the University of Florida. Well, it's actually, you can only do that lifestyle of entertainment for so long. You actually age out of it. I know some guys that are actually my age that are still into it, and I wouldn't want to do that. It's really demanding. You're out in the hot sun 3 to 5 shows a day. And just the whole entertainment, it's a very young place. You know, it's a place where people are learning the world, and they're all, and you kind of, once you've been seasoned and gone through all that, you got to kind of get out of their way to let new people in. But my Maiko, my wife, she wanted me to stop doing it because when I became the entertainment director, I was working literally from 6 o'clock in the morning. I'd be coming home to the park at like 12:30 at midnight, because after the park closed, I had to also go around and check all of the sound equipment. Like say we were having a parade and we're having the parade go through the park. I had to run that parade through the park and made sure the speakers came on when they were supposed to at different places. And she just said, is there something else you can do? I'm not seeing you. When I was just a performer, we saw each other all the time because she would get off work, I would get off work, and we'd have all the evenings together and do stuff. And she actually lived with me in Tokyo too, when I went and played for Tokyo Disney Sea and came and lived with me there. So we always had time. But when I became in the management, which paid, you know, so well, so much more, I had no time. So I told her, hey, you know, I've got these college degrees. Let's stick with teaching college, and maybe I'll go get a job doing that. And then I, you know, end up getting the job at UF, and I've never turned back. I absolutely love the University of Florida. I love being a jazz director. I love giving back the knowledge to the students that I teach, and I get to have students and send them out to these Universal gigs and Disney gigs, and they come back world changed. I've had 7 friends that have married Japanese wives and have Japanese children now, and Chinese as well. And so it's really a dynamic environment, and it's filled with the same players too. A lot of the same people are all doing it. But anyway, I got out of it, and I'm really happy I did, and happy that other people have the opportunity to do it.
Ron Burrichter says hi.
Where is he on?
No. He's our choral director here at Okemwic. And I mentioned to him that you were giving IR series, and he talked a little bit about you and what a great guy you were, and he said hi.
Ron was amazing. When I was a young lad and going to college here and doing the vocal stuff, he was my director for the chamber singers. That I think those were the heydays of the chamber singers, because we toured. We went to Vienna, Australia. I mean, we sang with the Russian Red Army Choir, Salzburg. It was really a lot of fun. And Ron was a huge influence in my life. He treated me very, very well. He was an excellent, excellent director. And gosh, that would have been, he was young back then. He and Ron were just in their, you know, I guess 30s or something.
When does the budgeting process start with one of these shows?
The budgeting process starts pretty much immediately as we start together. How much resources it like comes in as a big, huge chunk of the pie, and then we start seeing, okay, what can we do with that? Of course, there's millions and millions of dollars involved. For example, just to do our Christmas show, we wanted to have a giant Christmas tree in the middle of the park. But what we wanted is we wanted it to be so big that we could put a performer that could go up the middle of it and walk out on a stage in the middle of this Christmas tree and play and talk to the audience. So now we got to figure out who makes a Christmas tree that big? Who anywhere in the world makes a Christmas tree that big? How much does it cost to get it shipped to Japan? And how do they have to have people here that assemble it, that are their own crew, right? What are the safety precautions of that? And then the Christmas show, where we hired Joe Alfuso, who wrote The Perfect Storm. If you saw the movie The Perfect Storm, he's one of the LA studio writers. We have to have him score it. How much money is that going to cost? And then they get it recorded in Audio by the Bay, which is the big LA recording studio with all the orchestra stuff. How much is it going to cost for the whole orchestra? How much is it going to cost for the writing? How much is it going to cost for the producers to produce the show to get just that Christmas track? Imagine how much money that is. And we're just talking one piece of the puzzle, one tiny puzzle. So
one other thing, you cannot have Keith Berg. He's our drummer.
Awesome. Yes, Don, did you have a question?
Diane, go ahead, unmute.
Or was that Don?
Diane, I see.
Oh,
Yeah, Scott, when you were away in Japan and China for a number of years, and then you came back to the US, did you have any trouble adjusting back here? I mean, maybe you weren't as adored here as you were there, but were there adjustments?
all here. Yes, I had a very difficult time adjusting. One is because the culture of the Japanese is so endearing. They are such a polite, respectable culture. You recognize the second that you're in Japan when you go and get on a flight to Japan and you have a Japanese stewardess. You've never been treated with such royalty and kindness and grace. And, oh, you know, even when you walk into, as I told someone else, McDonald's, you feel like you're in a 5-star restaurant. They greet you at the door with white gloves. That you come in, as you get your order, they make sure that it's good. Is it hot? Is it fresh? Oh, did he serve you? When they come over, if there's a blemish on the table, they're immediately all over it. The way that the Japanese interact and how gracious they are is one of the greatest joys I've ever experienced in my life, because I had no idea a culture was even possible of doing that. Then you come back to Japan, and the second you get on the, in the airport, they're like, yes, next, and next, move your luggage over here, next, and also you go to eat something, and it's a huge adjustment coming from Japan back to the United States. And if I was going to probably live anywhere other than here, it would probably be Japan because of that. And the same thing with China is, when we were there, the Chinese make very, very little money. Just so you know, I think I was making $185 a day at the time. But I remember it was more money than the Chinese paid in a month, working all day, and weekends too. So the Japanese dollar, the American dollar was worth 8 times also the Japanese dollar. So it was like me working one day making 8 months salary. So if I wanted to take my crew out, my band out, the big band, and say, hey, we're going to go out to dinner, I could feed the entire band and take them to an incredible restaurant with lemon chicken. We got the Lazy Susans. Everybody's just eating and feasting and doing that for 15 American dollars. Basically $1 a person. So that was like really different to get back, and then all of a sudden, have to pay $3.50 for a Coca-Cola and things like that. Don, did you have a question? Oh,
can you hear me now?
Yes.
2 questions. You mentioned Disney Sea. Could you tell us a little bit about that? The second question is, do you happen to have any examples of any of the music you wrote for any of these theme parks?
No, unfortunately, when I write the music, I turn it over to them. It's theirs.
Okay.
And they keep it. And they have a really tight constraint on who gets to hear that music and if it gets videotaped and recorded and stuff and how it's released. I have some of my own personal home videos that I've, made and over the time. I have no idea where those are. It's been so long, but to show some of the shows. Let me talk a little bit quickly about Tokyo Disney Sea. Hold on. This is how we would these are just cast members where we would have them come in and just take pictures so we knew who everybody was and what role they were playing. When I first got the job at Tokyo Disney Sea, at Tokyo Disney, it was really quite kind of exciting. Here's like our little Tokyo Disney Resort thing. Disney is a lot different than Universal. Some people have no idea how different they are. It's as different as China and Japan. For one, in Japan, Universal has a contract with the government, Universal Studios, and that contract with the government states that they have to provide American entertainment to the Japanese. So you have to hire people that look American and bring that cultural element into Universal Studios. You have to have people from the US, England, London, Australia. Basically, that melting pot. In Tokyo Disney Sea, it's entirely different. They have an entirely different relationship with the government and everything like that. And in order to work there, you can't work there as an American unless they can't find someone in Japan who can specifically do that role. So for me, the reason why I got to work at Tokyo Disney Sea, and a lot of people didn't, is because they didn't have the trumpet part that was recorded for that in this show that had 500 people. This was called Rhythms of the World, and it had all of the different cultures of the world, the samurai soldiers, the African American these, the you know, Spanish this, that had all of these different outfits, and they came out and sang songs and did all that. Well, that show had 27 high Fs on the trumpet in the show. If you didn't know what that is, it's 27 times. And they didn't have any Japanese that could play that. So me and my roommate were both hired for that Tokyo Disney Sea. And one of the cool things is, like, you go to do the beginning of the show, you got Mickey and Minnie Mouse, and they're opening the show. Hey, everybody, how's it going? You know, in Japanese. And it starts with this trumpet solo, you know, and you got this mic on your trumpet, and it's going out to this amphitheater, and it's outside, and everybody is hearing it. Even if you blow into the trumpet like this, it goes throughout the thing. So when you miss a note, everybody hears it. If you miss a note, it's loud, proud, and loud. So that was one of the most focused gigs I've ever been on, because the Japanese also don't have a musicians union, so they can make you play when it's freezing and snowing. Here it cuts off, I think, at about 46 or 44 degrees, and then you're legally get paid, but you don't have to play. Not there. We'd be in the snow playing, trumpet players pulling the trumpets off their lips, and literally no skin left on their lips from the snow and everything being so cold. So I would have to wake up in the morning at like 6 a.m. I'd have to get in the bathtub. I'd have to re-massage my entire face. I'd have to do all kinds of facial exercises and get this to be so loose from the beating it was taking every single day. And that was it was very stressful. It's the reason why I don't take lead trumpet gigs anymore. I like the jazz playing gigs. I get paid the same amount of money. I just go in, I play the jazz book. Woo, super fun. I don't have to warm up. You know, I'm ready to go. So that's the difference between kind of Tokyo Disney and Universal. Also, Universal likes to take you as you are. So when I was musical director, that comedian Dave Eastgate comes into work one day, and he just decided he was going to make a mohawk and stick it straight up, you know, like this. And I'm like, okay, Dave, you've completely changed your look. Like, we've got to recast your show. We got to do. He's like, oh, mate, I'm working on this new comedy skit with this mohawk. I just need to have it for a little while. And I'm like, all right, sure, I can work around that. But at Disney, when I made the college all-stars bands, when we were down there, the seasonal bands that play there, the toy soldiers and stuff, all that, I walked into the Disney thing, me and my roommate, Evan Raghavan, we walked into our orientation, and my hair was barely on my collar. And they're like, you can't even go into orientation until that's cut. Evan and I both have hair on here in the collar. And the guy's like, you have to go home. You'll have to come back to orientation another day. I'm like, we drove from Gainesville. We're going today. We'll cut this off right now. How do we cut it off? He only had a pair of those cardboard cutter scissors with the jagged edge. That's the only scissors this guy had. And then he could find the office. He's like, I can cut it with this. And I was like, oh God. So we cut our hair with those to get into orientation. And Disney is an indoctrination. Universal doesn't have this. So when you go into Disney, you have the whole, you know, this is Walt Disney, this is how it was built, this is how the things, they take you around the park. You have, by the time you're done, you feel like you're just can't wait to work for this amazing machine. But it isn't a whole indoctrination, the Walt Disney indoctrination. Universal, you just come in as is, boom, you know, and do your thing. Is somebody else? Yes, David, you had a question.
Hey, yeah, Scott, thanks. This is great. We really enjoyed it. And I want to ask a little bit more about China. How long were you at the theme park in China? And what were your impressions of the Grand Link? Of course, it's a special theme related somehow. Is that right? And what did you, and where is it? In fact, where is it in Shandong province?
Well, Gremlin World is in Qingdao, China. And
Yeah.
yeah, and the thing about that gig, it was the best and worst gig of my life. It was so amazing because we came in here, it was like gonna be a brand new Walt Disney World. And we were in charge. Me and all of my young friends, that I was like 30 at the time. And we were building the recording studios and doing all this and writing. And literally we had the top of the food chain. I hired a bunch of guys from Disney Orlando, and I didn't hire them. Actually, my roommate, Paul Weichel, the person who hired me, he was my roommate later. I ended up going and living with the guy. He hired us to come in and play and to do all the stuff. It was amazing. Like, we had a complete run of the show. We could be as creative as we want. We had complete run of the budget. We had complete run of the casting. I thought we had died and gone to heaven. We were never going to move. Yeah. We were actually never going to move from this place. We were like, how much we were treated, and our dollar went so far, we could buy anything. One day we're walking the Great Wall of China. The next minute, we're in the bamboo gardens, and, it was great. But what happened was that park had all kinds of financial problems because the Japanese people or the Chinese people simply couldn't afford even the most modest ticket. You have to realize, even the workers are coming in, they're working, and their food they eat out of a big vat. This is going to gross you out. But these union workers, they work out of a big vat, and there's maggots in there and everything like that. And they just scoop them in and scoop them out and stuff like that. They're very, very poor people. And they realized it wasn't going to be able to be sustainable. But the big problem with that, this is a true story. So they realized they have to pay the performers. And the performers haven't been paid their salary. So they decided they were going to bring over $100,000 through the black market and bring it and pay us in cash, in American cash dollars. It's true. This is a true story. And we're like, oh man. And because the performers are like, yeah, we need to get paid. Turns out the guy, and it was on the news, got busted at the airport with our money. So those kind of things. See, this is the difference between Japan and China. China, they do things any way possible. There are no rules, there are no morals, there are no nothing. It's like, we just do the business like this. Japanese are very, very detailed. So then they decide, we actually decided the performers were going to go home. We were going to go ahead. The park looked like it was going to be closing. A developer had actually bought the park and built the park only to buy up all the property around the park and sell it at a very high rate. And then he split town. I think he was arrested for it because they would come in and it was starting to get crazy. So finally, I'm the musical director here, me and this guy, Paul Weichel, and the performers are going home, and they hadn't gotten paid their last paychecks. And the guy goes, we're going to try this black market thing again. We're going to try to bring it at $100,000 through the airport. And they got it to us. And I had to rush because the performers were already going to the airport. I had to rush in a car driving through China to get to the airport. And then I got there and the performers were coming out and I was paying them out of a truck. Totally illegal. Totally illegal. I'm sitting in a truck, they're walking up and I'm handing them thousands of dollars. And they're going back to get on the plane. I thought I was going to go to jail. I literally did. I was like, but I was not going to let those performers go home without getting paid. That was my integrity. And I was like, I'm going to sit in a prison cell if I have to do this with this money, and got it paid. Now, Japanese, oh my gosh, totally different. So legit. They are so legit. And that's why when I went to Japan and I worked in Japan, I'm like, this is where it's at. Everything is always money on the time. Everybody's respectful. No weird or shady stuff at all. Everybody's super, super high integrity. So that was there. So in the end, I ended up being there, I think, about 5 months.
Yeah. What a story. Thanks so much.
Yep.
Thank you, Scott. It's fascinating today, just fascinating. Are there any other questions or comments at this point? Okay, I think we're going to say thank you once again, Scott, and we will see you next week, and you will we'll put on our dancing shoes and go through the 40s with you. I think a lot of us were around in the 40s. So you have a big audience. Okay, so if that's all, Don, do you have anything more that you would
No, I
like?
just want to emphasize what you did and say thanks, Scott, and be here to join us for the Bebop Revolution next week.
Mhm.
Yeah, Bebop Revolution. Well, thank
And
you for
just
letting me.
one more quick question, if you don't mind.
Okay.
Dale Williams, go ahead.
No, I don't have a question. I was just fascinated with the whole presentation. I did send Don a message to ask Scott to do something, but I guess he didn't get it.
No, actually, you did get it, Dale. We were talking just before you joined us. Dale was the person who sent in the request about a video of you break dancing.
I'll try to find it. I'll try to find what I was telling Don. It was early 80s, and the only people that had video cameras were those big ones. But I have a group called the Hollywood Superstars that filmed them. So I'm reaching out to them to see if they still own some of those videos. But I thank you for letting me join you today and take you down some memory lanes of my own and some about the entertainment industry to kind of give you a bird's eye view. Next week, I look forward to presenting more musical stuff and stuff. But I thought you guys would like to see one of your UF grads, what you created, the life that you gave me at the University of Florida, teaching me, gave me a wonderful life. And so I'd love to give back to you and share with you that life.
It was excellent. It was excellent.
See you all next week. Bye-bye.
See you all next week.
Bye.
Thank